We've all heard the expression, the stars have lined up. But what does it mean? Is it the red carpet outside the Oscars? Or is it that moment when everything seems to mesh? When all the things that we've been working on and all the things that we need to happen seem to have suddenly aligned and created a pathway that can make us do great things? Why do the stars seem to line up? What causes it? Is it our own actions? Is it coincidence? And perhaps more importantly, why do the stars sometimes seem to move apart, having lined up? And then, no matter what we do, we can't seem to be able to get the things done, get to the point we want to get to. Well, here's my story. It starts about 3 decades ago. I was at the top of my game. I'd completed my master's degree, started up an engineering company, traveled a fair bit, and was really having fun with technology. When I received a call from the office of the Prime Minister, newly elected of Trinidad and Tobago, and he wanted to see me. And he said to me, find me an energy minister, or be it. Now, I think you all know the person we're talking about, and you could just imagine him smiling, rocked back in his seat saying this. I was obviously flattered, but not really wanting to be a minister or a politician. So I found him an energy minister instead. And the interview process was simple. He said, are you the guy Donald sent? And he took him in to get sworn in. But then he came back to me and he said, well, you didn't want that job, but we have the most difficult job in the country for you, to be the chairman of Petrotrin, our national oil company. In my youthful arrogance, I said, yes, why not? But I didn't understand what I was taking on at that moment. And then I started to find out. And then I saw the history of Petrotrin and all the predecessor companies for 100 years that came to Trinidad and Tobago to develop our oil industry, and how there were mergers and acquisitions and different cultures that all came together to form this entity called Petrotrin. It was now a group of about 8 companies. There were employees adding up to more than 10,000. There was more land held by Petrotrin than any other entity, and more sporting facilities than any in the Caribbean. And yet Petrotrin was a failing company. It was bureaucratic, inward-looking, not focusing on business, poorly managed, polluting, almost all the bad things you could say about an oil company. So I decided, what are my options here? I could enjoy the ride, which many people actually do in these offices, or I could decide that I want to become part of a change that I felt we needed in the country. So I started to analyze what would be needed. The first person I went to was the President General of the trade union. This is even before I was formally appointed. And I said, I'm going to be appointed chairman of Petrotrin, and I want to understand where you stand, and I want you to understand what I want to accomplish, because I believe there's a lot of overlap. And we started talking, and I saw how we could work together, and then I did that with every member of the board, and then I started reaching out to major stakeholders and building up the relationships that I felt was needed. I was guided by this quote from Machiavelli that really said, if you want to make big change happen, the people who will benefit from the change, they're not on your side because they don't believe. And the ones who benefit from the old order, they're obviously in your way when you try to change things. So I started to understand what I was taking on, and I started to reach out to stakeholders, starting with the employees. I realized that there was a layer of management that was preventing this from happening. And in fact, they wanted to lead the change. So they started producing all these very thick colorful documents and all the plans. But these plans had been tried before and none of them worked. So I used this analogy of a sailboat. And I said to them, we are setting sail from this port that is defined by all the wrong things, poor performance in every area. And we're going to a port that is defined by a green company adding value to all its stakeholders. But in a sailboat in the sea, you're going to meet tides, currents, storms, all sorts of things. We are going to have to change course as we go. However, the destination is the same. And that allowed us to actually start the process of the change without having this mapped plan that would surely disappear within the first couple months. And we started. And we worked on restructuring, performance management, consequence management. We worked on the employee satisfaction levels. We started to make real change happen. And when I could not reach the ground employees, I started to have a breakfast session every Sunday. I would sit with 10 employees, taken at random. I wouldn't know who they were until I arrived. And at the end of the breakfast, we sit in a circle. And I say, tell me anything you want. Ask me anything that's on your mind. I promise you I'm going to give you an answer. You have to promise me that you will find 10 people when you leave here and tell them the story and ask them to tell 10 more people. And we started to spread the word about the change. And we were actually, in retrospect, lining up more of the stars that caused us to be able to get more and more things done. So what happened? Every year, the profits were higher than the year before. So after 5 years, we were making 10 times the profits of before we started. The employee satisfaction index, which we were measuring, was improving. We weren't losing as many staff as before. The environmental performance, well, that was just fantastic. But it involved having to terminate the manager when we had the first major oil spill. So everybody knew that things were different. All of our indices were improving in the right direction. But hear what? Remember the quote from Machiavelli. As much as we were making positive things happen, we were collecting enemies. People who were benefiting by the old order, who wanted things to go back to the good old days, the way it was before. And I was pushing things a little harder by going after all the major partners who had been milking the company for many years, hundreds of millions of US dollars, that we said, no, this flow has stopped. And we started to take them to court, to arbitration, to the court of public opinion. And we started to get back some of what the company had lost and was losing all the time. But they were not taking that so easily. They were working really hard to cause things to go back. So I went further and defined this project of the burning platform, which actually was a platform of the North Sea that was on fire. And one of the few persons who survived it was a man who jumped off into the freezing cold water with all this debris burning. And when he was pulled into the rescue boat, he was asked, why did you do this? Why did you jump? And he said, if I had stayed on the platform, I would surely die. So if I had a small chance of surviving by jumping more than 100 feet into this water, I had to take the chance. And I went around office to office. In fact, on New Year's Day that year, I went to every single office of Petrotrin and shook everybody's hand and spoke to them about what we were doing. and we were making the change happen. They understood the burning platform. I inspired myself by writing this. I have to be a leader of change, or the last consequence is I will be changed. The organization has to be made to survive, and you can take the organization to mean many different things. Going back here, I was faced with a situation with a very bad deal that was attempting to be carried out that would hurt generations to come. And I felt I had to prevent it. And I did. But in the process, I had to commit a sort of a sort of a benevolent suicide. And I had to resign. And at that moment, the 5 most senior members of the board resigned with me. And I felt that the world had crashed, but I had so much energy. So I put it to a new project, which is the Caribbean Energy Transition, and started a new course in the year 2001. So now we're talking 23 years ago. I started on this pathway to change the world in a different way, through helping us to move from 90% energy from hydrocarbons to 100% renewable. And I've been working on that while trying to get the stars to line back up. And I realized that the stars don't just line up for you as a person, but also for your cause. The cause has evaded us in many ways, but now it's changed because of climate change. Climate change has made the energy transition become an imperative. And I believe that the stars are lined up again, and it's time now to make it happen. There's a part 2 of this story. Stay tuned. Thank you.